to Adjust presents If Testimony Was a Person, the podcast where we talk to professionals of all walks of life about their journey, their personal life and how it intersects with their professional life. And we often hit on issues of inclusion, diversity, and equity. Today we have a guest that I'm honored to have. This person is the Chief Diversity Officer.
Correct.
For Suffolk County, running for legislator in the 16th district.
Yes, county legislator in the 16th district of Suffolk County.
Yeah. And you do your own work in where you are partnering some development interests.
Yes, in other districts of New York. Yes, absolutely.
We would like you to meet Mr. Sidney Joyner. We appreciate you being here, sir.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you are a Brooklyn native.
Yes, absolutely. Born and raised in Brooklyn, grew up in Farragut houses in downtown Brooklyn. Born in Brooklyn Hospital, as many people like to say, you know, who've been born from there and raised there. And it was a storied existence. It was a great time to grow up in Brooklyn. A lot of good friends, a lot of good relationships fostered throughout my lifetime that are still strong today. My best friend I met in the 4th grade there.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. I have those kind of friends too. I started out in Brooklyn, but was raised mostly in Queens. But you were in Brooklyn up into your adulthood. So
yes, I was up until probably my early 30s. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And so you went to Westinghouse, which I refer to as the hip hop high school.
Yes.
Jay-Z, Biggie.
Right.
Busta Rhymes.
Yes.
And so when you went to college, you went to the South.
Right. I mean, there's a story behind that. My sister went to Murray Bertram. My cousin went to Murray Bertram. My mom kind of wanted me to go to Murray Bertram. I had a different plan because I wanted to play basketball. So I just played ball since I was early in the years, and I, had a good, rapport with it. And Westinghouse was a big school that played great. He played a lot of Lincoln, played a lot of large games, and was well known. So I went to Westinghouse, and I stayed there for a couple of years before I transferred out, though. But that led me to, to look into college, looking at an HBCU, and making that a focal point. And I ended up deciding to go to Virginia Union University.
Virginia Union.
Yeah, Virginia Union University. Great university at the time. Still continues to be a great university, but it was an interesting experience to say.
Talk about that experience a little bit.
Well, yeah, I got down there. It was beautiful to see. I did have problems. The campus wasn't up to what I thought it would be. But I had some great relationships there as well. The first year was really good. Had college life that was experienced in ways of seeing what it was actually like to be on college, be away from home. That was interesting. Always maintained and had a good time. Made some great friends there as well. One of the things that was a detractor for me is understanding the history in terms of what HBCUs had experienced in terms of having comparable funding, so to speak. So this was a school that didn't receive the funding that it probably should have because there were dilapidated residences there. There were just a lot of things that were happening that were struggling. Our dormitories were pretty rough. And so it kind of turned me off in that regard as well. And that ended up in me leaving and going back up north where I finished up at school at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I studied forensic psychology.
Oh, John Jay. I was at John Jay for a bit.
Yeah, I finished up there. And that was a great experience as well. I was able to knock down my student loan debt by working
I can imagine.
Yeah, I knocked it down by working at Roosevelt Hospital, which was across the street.
Oh, yeah.
Where I also joined the 1199 union before it merged with SEIU. And I got to do a little bit of lobbying there, going up to Albany to fight for tuition decreases and other health-related issues. And so that was a great experience for me as well.
So in a moment, I'm going to go back to Virginia Union because that's, I think, an important issue.
Right.
But the lobbying that you did with 1199, this was your first experience with what might be connected to politics?
Yes, I would say that was my first experience was handing out flyers for a local assemblyman in Brooklyn who had his offices on Fulton Street. It was Roger L. Green at the time. He was an assemblyman, and I had opportunity to hand out flyers, which kind of piqued my interest. Doing some extra work and just seeing what was going on in his office and saying, okay, this is how we participate in our community and try to make a difference. So
Yeah.
that piqued my interest, where I started really paying attention to current events and being a little bit more involved. And then we jumped to college, and that's where in that year between high school and college is where I became more conscious and more not to say conscious, but use that as a term of saying more aware of what our environment was here in Brooklyn and the interrelation between governmental leadership and in government and how that made a difference in our communities. And so with that, I went down to Union, as we spoke about, and looked at all of the macro issues that they were dealing with as well. And I came back up to New York, and I said, let me continue to work up here, and was kind of focusing on leading to going to law school.
Yeah. I mean, it actually warms my heart a little bit to hear that as a young man you were becoming aware just by being in the environments you were in.
Yes.
About the issues that existed, because you might think of the 90s, late 80s and 90s as a time when social consciousness kind of peaked.
Yes.
You had the peak of you had the Public Enemies and KRS-Ones in hip hop.
Right. Some of my favorite rappers.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, likewise. And then you had some activism going on in the 90s, which I was involved in. And so it's good to hear that. But going back to the HBCU that you were at, Virginia Union, I have found, and still to this day, that it's a historic problem with the facilities and the underfunding of everywhere from Morris Brown, which hit the newspapers nationally.
We can talk about that. Right. So Virginia Union was not the only school that was experiencing those issues.
Yeah.
So as you said, they still exist with various HBCUs, and that goes into their residential housing. How students at Howard last year went on strike in regards to their housing conditions, and it's happened in other places, Tuskegee and like you said, Morris Brown, who had they lost their accreditation, and then they did receive their accreditation again. They're back as a functioning institution as of last year, I believe. So that's a testament to a success story that went well. That we brought that college back online and is existing well. But yes, so that's a historic problem. And then for me to come into that environment, I thought I was expecting to see a little bit more, and I had to get the perspective of being there for a year to understand why it was in this condition. Leadership was a part of it, and there were other reasons that was a part of it as well, as in terms of the funding and the use of the funding and how it was applied there. So in stark contrast to that is going back through the years and supporting the school through the homecoming and visiting and seeing the trajectory of where they were at that point to where they have come to, and seeing new buildings opened up and the grounds improved, and it being a beautiful institution that is now has a greater impact on the Richmond community.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's that's one of the success stories.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah. So you're at Virginia Union, you end up at John Jay, and then you got the degree in criminal justice with an intention to go into what?
Well, I got my degree at John Jay was in forensic psychology.
Oh, okay.
So it was in forensic psychology. I did enjoy psychology, the studies of it, and it was a precursor for me to go into law school. That was really the focus of it. But the question, as I was getting closer to graduation, the question was, did I plan on practicing law, or did I want to use it for something else? And what I wanted to use it for was to get into the commercial real estate world.
Okay.
Which, one of my loves growing up was architecture, and living in a city where you had such a rich history of architecture. Yeah. And there was just so many things that you could just look to and just didn't know what the story was behind them, how they were built, but you knew there was a lot to them. So I wanted to be a titan of the industry, I should say, and be able to participate in the New York City commercial real estate market. And so I figured to myself, I could save myself some money by going to work for a company at that time of graduation, and then just immersing myself in the world of deal making, and kind of put and think in the future about getting a master's, but put on the back burner law school. I didn't turn it off, but I said, I put it on the back burner. Plus, I was being a little bit cost conscious because I just, was really working on paying my undergraduate bills. So
Absolutely.
I didn't want to incur any more debt. So, I kind of put that off. But yeah, and I went and I interviewed with companies, and I got a position. I think it was Cushman Wakefield, but it was a line position where you work in supporting and doing research. And I wanted to actually be involved more in the actual deal making. So I went to what you would call a lower tier, different size company, and the Queens area that I actually worked on, focusing on the Brooklyn market. I had my license, salesperson's license, got all of that, and then I just started making deals. And I interviewed with a couple of companies, and one of them, which was Crosstown Realty. Tony Musto, the owner, I just had a great rapport with him. He said, you can get in and we'll work with you and we'll train you and we'll bring you on. And I started working with them, and I was there for about 20 years. And at the same time, while being there, I was part of non-for-profit organizations where I developed my skills in terms of non-for-profit leadership through working with establishing the Urban Leagues, New York Urban Leagues chapter of the Young Professionals, and working on other organizations as well. In terms of board service and giving back to the community, to realize what I had already come to as being a greater part of our communities.
Who were the people that were mentoring you and or that you were looking at and saying these are people to use as a guide? Because you, either way, you deserve your props for being a person that was conscious in your youth. But I mean, did you have people that you were looking at?
Yeah, I give all credit to my mother who raised me. And my father was there, but he wasn't in the house. But he always stressed to me, because he was still a part of my life. He would have come by and visit my mother and the family, and he always stressed about education. So I, had that been about being focused on education, but it was my mother who put me in positions of learning and around mentors. She knew that at a certain age, around 13, 14, he might be, in her words, you're getting a little bit rambunctious by not listening and you're hanging out with the wrong people or something like that. And she would say that. And she said, you know what, I'm going to put you around some people who I know, community leaders, and also within the same religion, and saying, listen, take him and have some words with him. And she did, and we got together, and it was, I would say, it was almost like a life-changing experience to hear these men let you know that what your purpose should be and what your role is in your household, and that there are people who believe in you. You have a history, your family history is one that you want to respect, and that you should also be a leader in. So they really inculcated in me the need, the confirmation of who I was as a person, and saying that we value you and we invest in you and we want you to do the right things, and we're going to be watching you. And it was such a moving experience. I never forgot it, and I always thought about their impact on me in terms of providing me guidance to say, you need to focus on this, that, and the other, and you need to respect your relationship with your mother, your parents, and really use the gifts that have been given to you.
That's a beautiful, story, chain of events.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that moved me the most was that I once went to a training. I was already a mental health clinician, so this wasn't more than 15 years ago.
Okay.
And it was a white guy. He was a psychologist. He was given a training, and he basically said, I think somebody may have asked him, how did he become a psychologist? And he said something like, I was very lucky because I had a father who said, you have to do 4 unpaid internships where you work with a lawyer, a doctor, a psychologist, and a financial person.
Yes.
And after you finish with those 4, if you like one of those, we'll put you on track to go in that direction. And not that that's the way that it has to be done, but often people have direction given to them in that way, and it's intentional, and that's, just hearing what you said sounds like you had some direction afforded you, which was life-changing, and that's great.
Yeah, that was exactly the case. And there was also people that were in our family circle who would speak to that. Like, I tell people, one of the things, a crucial moment also in my life was growing up in a household that had respect for other religions. So my mother was Jehovah's Witness, and it provided the background where she had friends who were different religions. I mean, we would have Nation of Islam at our house, brothers who knew my mother for years before they converted. We would have Jewish people, we'd have Catholic people that would come by because they had friendship first, religion afterwards. And then they could come together and talk about their religious ideologies in a way where it was just love. So I saw that and respectful. So when people use the word tolerance, it's hard to me to think about tolerance because it should be a place of respect. And that's tied to what our country's principles and foundations was about, religious freedom. So I got to see that as a young person, and it just laid the groundwork for me to be able to speak to people of different backgrounds, religious differences, and be able to appreciate where they come from, not have a mental a mindset about tolerance.
That's great.
And just we can talk about the differences and the commonalities, and still have a great conversation and still be friends afterwards.
Right, because when you hear Nation of Islam in the room with Jehovah's Witness, you think,
it must have
you
been a
brainwashed. You brainwashed, sister.
Yes.
No, brother, you don't understand.
Right, that's exactly what you would think would happen. And I've seen those conversations happen in other places, but I did not see that happen in my home.
Right.
The brothers from Nation of Islam respected my mother. She respected them. And it was just great to see at a young age to see this is how discourse should happen.
Yep.
So that always stuck with me.
Well, you learned well.
Yeah.
You know.
I applied it today with talking to people of different political persuasions and different political ideologies about, how we try to work to come together to get things done for the greater good of the community. And regardless of political headwinds, that's my rudder that I steer from.
Right. That's wonderful. And so you ended up in real estate.
Yes, I did.
And or really you put yourself in real estate.
I put myself in real estate intentionally.
Right. And so from there, where did you go?
So being there for 20 years, I developed a lot of relationships. And I think one of the most successful things that I could say upon working with different people and doing all sorts of different deals, commercial, industrial deals, and so forth like that, is that the relationships that were developed. And that was really the keys to success, is how you treat people and how they treat you, and you can get repeat business because they admired the way that you did business. You kept to your word. And those principles were further ingrained in me in terms of how do you do business, because now we're operating on a level where there's money on the line, there's a lot of different levels of law, all of that impacts what you're doing, and you have to carve out a niche for yourself in terms of who do you represent as a person in business, what is your personal brand, and how do you market that, and how do you just engage with people on that so that you're a steady source of knowledge, you're a steady source of professionalism that they can always depend on.
Right.
And so from there, the pandemic hit. So I got around close to the pandemic before I left the commercial real estate industry. And I got a call from a friend that there were some opportunities in Suffolk County government, because the other aspect of being on the brokerage side of commercial real estate, where you're doing more transactional, is something that always interests me, was economic development. So we talk about how do we do economic development? How do we impact our communities? And I wanted to learn from that, from the aspect of being inside the government. Now, I wasn't inside Brooklyn government, I was inside Suffolk County government because we moved out to Suffolk County.
Right.
So nonetheless, there were still challenges there. There's still tremendous challenges in terms of affordable housing, equitable distribution of resources, funding. There was a host of different challenges there. So I was able to secure a job as the director of real estate there based upon my experience in the commercial world, and also my work with non-for-profits as well. And so I spent 2 years there, and I was tasked with working on a project that was pretty big. They have a 40, 50-year system of the surplus auction that they have within their for tax-indebted properties. And so historically, it had used the resources of the county to make it happen by having people who have other job duties now work in this capacity to fulfill this need. And so it was one that was an in-person type of situation. So my main task was helping. They already decided to move this onto a virtual platform.
Okay.
And so I finished the work with the RFP that was done, brought in that vendor, and worked with my team to actually bring together like 5 different departments within Suffolk County government, to bring them to work together and adopt this new platform, and then to be able to give the county the best results they've ever seen.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So it was a great challenge, and I appreciated the work, and I worked with a lot of great people there in my department and others, and it was really a good experience.
Right, and you got some results.
Yes,
that,
yes. We were able to secure $24 million in sales at that, and the highest had been in the history was $15 million.
Wow.
So by taking it to this virtual platform and all that it entailed, bringing it there and showing that, introducing modernity into a system that was rooted in systems that had gone on for the majority of its time, showing that it was a way to make it work better and more efficiently.
Suffolk County is a place that is very multifaceted.
Yes.
You know, you have people who have been there for a long time,
Yes,
and there's a
yes.
lot of history in that way. And then often,
Other history as well.
Oh yeah,
That's, you know.
often when I talk to people who are looking to buy a home in Long Island, they're like, I may have to look a little further out than I thought, and then they find somewhere that they love
Right.
in Suffolk County.
It's a second choice as opposed to Nassau County when you come from Brooklyn. As a person of color, there's stories and there's legacy that you're dealing with that you've heard about things that happened in Suffolk County or that were not favorable to people of color. Right. So there was instances that happened, and so you have some trepidation about it. And I understood that because I thought the same way as well. But because I met my wife and she interned at Stony Brook, it brought me out there. I thought I would probably live in Westchester or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
But my wife being a doctor, she graduated from a medical program, and one of the residency programs she got that she wanted to go to was at Stony Brook. And so Stony Brook is in Selden. And so that was all the way at the other side. So yeah, that was adjustment. So we started out, lived in East Meadow for a short time, for a year, and then we moved to Huntington as a meeting point, so to speak. She could get to work in 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes, and I could take an hour to get to work. You know, now 20 as it was commuting at that time.
Right.
Yeah. So, but it's been good, and being an activist, it's interesting because I immediately became active in the community there in Huntington. So I met Betty Miller, who introduced me to the Huntington NAACP. There were a host of others who opened their doors to me and said, yeah, come and this is what's going on here. Thus leading me also to become run for my first office as school board trustee for South Huntington.
Well, I'm sure that people recognized your spirit. Like, this is a community-minded person.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
He's here now, so
yes.
Join us.
Yes, exactly. That's kind of what it was. And when you talk about your background, they see that you have taken initiative to be a part of every community that you've been in.
Right.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what happened.
Mm-hmm. And, at that point, you became what was that position that you ended up in?
Well, that was a volunteer position outside of my work, which is to serve as a South Huntington school board trustee.
Oh, school board.
So that was an election process, which was different than having the Department of Education here in the city, where it's one agency that covers the entire city.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to say that New York City used to have school districts as well.
Oh yeah.
And that changed. With I forgot which mayor was, Koch or something, I believe it was. I can't recall, but it changed, and so they created one department, Board of Education, that maintained all the school systems. So Long Island represents what the rest of America looks like in terms of how their school districts are set up. Yeah. So it's.
Oh yeah, in New York City, you had Ocean Hill versus Brownsville.
Yes.
Fight in the late '60s.
Yes.
I mean, it was a lot of contention around school boards.
Yes.
I mean, we got to get these people out of here.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, you're right. It is very much a reflection of what you usually, the school board structure in Long Island is more of what you see usually in
the rest of America. Correct. Yeah, except for your larger cities like Los Angeles and others, and Chicago, where they have something similar to New York.
Right. So. And so this is like a consistent move towards community involvement that you've been in, and then from the school board, where did you go next?
Well, the school board, when I won the election, I became the second African American to be on the school board in that in 100-year history or 99-year history. So
that's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. And I wasn't aware of that, but it was brought to my knowledge as I was running to say how important this run is. That because there had been people of color who had run before and were not successful, and for a number of reasons, and through the strength of God, it happened. In my belief and faith, and also building coalitions with people throughout the district of all backgrounds. Again, the recurring theme about working with everyone instead of just working within a few people.
Talk about that a little bit more, like the constituencies that you can
Right.
identify in
Right.
Huntington, let's say. Who are those, and what do you see?
Well, we had the African American population, which was a small, no more, I believe, than 9%, 9 or 10%, and then you had the Hispanic population, which was a couple of points higher than that, probably at 13 to 15. And then you had Asians, and then you also had uh, a white demographic there. So the white demographic was probably in the 80s. Oh, no, probably in the 60s, I should say, probably largely. And yeah, it wasn't foreign to me to work with white people in that regard, because I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness with white people at my mother's table. So and within that religion, everybody's the same, and there's no difference. So I always had that strain along in my life of working with everyone, not fearing or not dividing anybody. Say I can't work with those. So that's one of the keys to it as well, because I came in there and I spoke to everybody, and I also understood that you have to build coalitions to want to work, but then to understand what's going on in the community. As somebody who's new, I may have an idea of what I perceive, but until you have walked in the shoes of those in the community and understand what's going on there, you can't really call yourself knowledgeable, I should say. And so I didn't do it as soon as I got there, but I was more so after I'd done some work in the community and built up enough relationships, and then because we hadn't had our first kids yet. So when that happened, I kind of decided to go ahead and make that move and prepare, because I wanted to be a part of the school board and the leadership there as well.
It's important to have people who are willing to work with everyone, because I
Yes.
think that what happens is that, there's the obvious, which is that there's hateful people,
Oh, absolutely.
but then even on the people of color side, there's people who I think tend to be fearful.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'll never forget that when I came into Huntington, there were some people that I served with in certain organizations who had told me that they don't go to certain areas of Huntington, or because they felt that this was a white area or so area, and that kind of baffled me. I understood where that could possibly come from, but we're in the 20th century now. There's not an area that I felt that I shouldn't be able to go to.
Right.
And so, I also wanted to share that with the young people who may have thought that as well, because, people can share those feelings and indoctrinate their young people with that same thought processes, and it kind of has to be broken, because
Yes.
in order for you to realize your blessings and your opportunities, you have to get outside of what's sometimes ideologies that have been brought to you.
Over the years, I've read stories about the Suffolk County Police that were, frankly, a little scary.
Oh, absolutely.
Like there
Absolutely.
was some things that I read about recruits that were coming on to Suffolk County Police being mistreated and almost like
Yes.
scared away from.
Yes. These are documented acts that have been, been addressed, and but they have happened. They have happened.
And I think about myself being in Georgia, and I was, with friends, but I got turned around, and I ended up in a community that was white and rural, and I was like, I'm not stopping this car until
I get to my destination.
Yeah,
Right.
Like if I see, Burger King or something, that's civilization, and
Right.
I'm not stopping until I see civilization.
Right, something that reminds
Right.
me of safety.
Right, and so I'm thinking that in a community like Suffolk County, that a lot of us have not been. I mean, the people who live in Suffolk are familiar, but even what you said, that there may be people who are. They may live there, but I don't go over there.
Yes, absolutely,
or something
absolutely.
like that. That is, that does lend itself to kind of xenophobia, fear
Exactly.
of other people,
fear of other people.
Yeah,
And so that still does exist on Long Island.
yeah. So I appreciate you being within yourself and your movements a person who would not yield to that, and a person who encourages other people not to.
Right.
Because we have to learn each other and figure this out if we're going to live in
If we're gonna,
communities.
yes, if we're going to
Yeah.
have a better world and to be able to work together with one another and not retreat to our corners of comfort of ignorance
Mm-hmm.
and xenophobia.
Yep.
You know, we have to have knowledge of each other and be respectful. We're all human beings,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's important to bring it down to that very humanistic element.
I agree. So the legislative work is very important work. And I mean, was it kind of a natural extension of what you've been doing, or
Yes.
was there something that drove you to?
Well, a number of things. I had worked on a number of campaigns, volunteering, call banking, doing various tasks for attorney general's campaigns, presidential campaigns, just being a volunteer wherever I could in local offices as well. So understanding what that was like from that perspective was also very helpful. And then just through my work with the Urban League, lobbying, advocating for issues that affect African American communities and communities of color, with legislators in Albany and all the way down to Washington, D.C., I got the opportunity to do that in those roles that I served.
Right.
And so that was a precursor for me to think about what it would be like to be on the other side and to actually be an elected official. And so when I was in the role of Director of Real Estate at Suffolk County, I served on committees. I served on the Economic Development Committee. I served on the Ways and Means Committee. And so I served on these committees with legislators and working with them to do the work of the county and the work of the people. And so I got to know a number of legislators, and in this capacity, because I have relationships with congressmen from from D.C. to New York and Albany, and it was just a natural extension of that made me have it in my mind. It was in my mind to think about that, but I hadn't actualized it. So I received reach out from the Suffolk County Dems leader, which is also the town of Babylon's supervisor, Rich Schaefer, through a friend, Dwayne Gregory, to say, would you think Sidney Joyner would be interested in running for county legislator for the 16th district? And I believe Dwayne Gregory said at that time, oh, yeah, I think he'd be interested, but I can talk to him first. And so that's kind of how the process germinated. And then once they brought it to me, I was very humbled by it. And it was it just piqued in my mind that, this is interesting, because I had screened in prior years with the Huntington Democratic Party for roles of the of town supervisor and town council. So I sat in the screening and met with their leadership, and they expressed, Frank Petrone, former town supervisor of Huntington, expressed a lot of interest in me running, and I appreciated his vote of confidence in me. But after just thinking about how what I could accomplish at this time, and I started working on a master's degree, MBA at the Columbia University, I said, let me hold off on it. But then when this one came, I was like, you know what, this seems like the right time and right opportunity, and plus the current inhabitant of that incumbent, just didn't feel that he is doing the job correctly.
Okay.
And I definitely feel that I can bring a level of leadership that reflects what the community really needs and where they need to go.
That's great. And what are those leadership points that you think that you could bring?
Well, for one thing, my style of servant leadership is being that you have to lead with service in your mind. You have to go on through positions to serve in order to know what leadership is about.
Sure.
And in that respect, I've done the work in terms of being behind the scenes for a number of years on different capacities to understand those intersections and how we actually get things done, how we get legislation done, how we get the buy-in from community, how do we address various issues that are affecting different communities. And so that led me to the work that I do on affordable housing in terms of supporting affordable housing and advocating for it. My role as director of real estate, I was able to go before the legislature and ask for funding in the capital budget to actually provide to affordable housing developers because of the way that their capital stack is developed and how they actually achieve building these units is through support from governmental agencies. And so I know what it's like to be in that room, and I know what it's like to engage with legislators and understand their work. And I look forward to learning more about it. Hopefully, as a candidate who has won the position through the support of the community.
What day is the election?
November 7th of 2023.
Yeah, that's very important. Local elections are something that it has been surprising to me how many people underestimate local elections.
You bring up a wonderful point right there because, and this is an off-year election because it's not a presidential election,
Right.
so you get less of a turnout.
Right.
And we just had a recent vote for a school board that happened a couple of days ago, for May 16th, to vote for referendums and issues, bond issues, or so forth, and also to vote for school board candidates.
Yeah.
And if you jump onto Newsday and you look at the list of schools that everyone who voted or participated in that across Long Island, you can see the numbers of participation from the public, and you see them at such low numbers. You would be astonished to see, 1,000 people in an 88,000 district or 2,000 people in large districts who participate in the voting process. And it's really important that, when you don't participate in the voting system, you think it doesn't matter to you. These are the very offices that govern your resources locally at your everyday life.
Everyday level.
Everyday level.
Yeah.
And, we have to, as a group of people, and I'll just say this across the board for all persuasions, to be more engaged in the electoral process because it matters tremendously. We can get caught up in presidential politics, but where the rubber meets the road is here on local politics.
Local level, yeah.
Yes.
I'll just say, without mentioning any particular people, we've been in a couple of towns as a mental health practice,
Right.
and sometimes we have gotten a feeling that the people who are in charge in those towns have known each other for 30, 40 years.
Yes.
And they are simply not that interested in what is going on with people who are not in their crowd.
Right.
And,
Right. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And yes, and I've experienced that from people whose children are in other districts where they don't feel like they can even speak to their school board trustees or have an audience with them. And that shouldn't be because, as a tax-paying resident with children in the district, you have all the rights and more to speak directly to your school board trustees and all your elected leaders and have an audience with them. And you should demand that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to break that cycle. I encourage young people, any role that I serve in, I would love to bring you into it because service, Shirley Chisholm's quote will always reign supreme. Service is the rent we pay for our existence here. And, it's just engaging them more, but we still have to engage adults as well. Because there are many adults who are like, oh, you're running for county legislator? What's the terms? Or I don't even know who my legislator is. Yeah. And that's a problem, right? Because you should know who your county legislator is. But I understand people lead busy lives. But, when it comes to where you live at, where you decide to live at, you make a choice. And that choice should be to know what's going on in your community and to be an active participant, to be a full citizen.
Yeah. I've heard people who are maybe a little bit older than us, or maybe even our contemporaries, say that, back in the day, the old civics classes.
Yes.
Where they kind of taught community participation
Absolutely.
and how to go about that. And,
that was a great class,
right.
but not valued.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the ones that, was pulled off from the curriculum.
Right. And so in New York City schools, I was a former guidance counselor, so I'm just
cool.
remembering that they had what was called participation in government. But even that, I think, was a watered down version of maybe what civics was, because kind of make you learn the the
branches
of government,
right.
and how the Congress elects and everything, but people need to understand on a more organic level how it affects you, what you can and should and could do on a regular basis.
And also what programs that could assist you, because there's a tremendous amount of programs that your local municipality provides that you're not even aware of. If you're not asking the right questions or just perusing and being active in your local government.
Right.
There might be fees you're paying. There might be a host of different things that you are due to have, but because you're not in tune or just educated about what's going on, you miss out on. Those are opportunities that and rights that we have that are not being exercised.
I was at my son's school the other night, and they were having, in that town, they were having the election for the school board that night.
Mm-hmm.
And the concert, it was a spring concert, and the kids were singing and doing their thing. And they were like, we're going to finish this a few minutes before 9 so that if you haven't voted, go over next door and vote. And, people were like, all right,
but no bearing.
Right. But I think that it just speaks to the disconnect that there is. And if you in the position that, God willing, that you'll get, if you can help to make a more of a connection with people in that regard, it'll be a great thing.
Yes, absolutely. My full goal is to make sure that the office that I would be in is that it's an open office, that it's an office filled with education and opportunities for opening the door to the public about what a county legislator can do. And just making sure that we have youth involvement and we have an adult involvement to support and understand what's going on so they can spread the knowledge as well and be a part. And I think it's a crucial component to service in that office.
That's wonderful. As time gets closer, hopefully we can have you back.
Oh, love to come back. This has been a great opportunity. I want to thank you.
Yeah, it is a pleasure. And, I always feel like it's important for our voices to be heard. And so, it's a great opportunity to have you here also.
Thank you. And I want to take hats off to you for focusing on mental health because it is one of the greatest problems of our time. Not being able to support those who are mentally challenged or dealing with various stages of mental illness. And as we see that the funding and the respect for that is no longer there, nor are the institutions there, really.
Yeah.
So the work that you do, I want to take my hats off to you because you're doing some great work.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
If people would like to contact you in your role of, to talk to you about your candidacy, to contact you in general professionally, what are your platforms?
I'm on all of the social media platforms except, TikTok?
Mm-hmm.
That's to be announced soon, I guess. I was told I need to do that. So you can find me under Sidney Joyner, Sidney B. Joyner, at all of those. And you can also find me under Friends of Sidney Joyner at Facebook and also on Gmail as well. And the other platforms as well, so Instagram and so forth.
That's very intuitive. Friends of Sidney Joyner.
Friends of Sidney Joyner says it all.
SIDNEY.
Correct. Yes.
JOYNER.
SIDNEY.
Right.
JOYNER. Friends of Sidney Joyner.
All right. Excellent.
No, let me just get this right. Friends of Sidney Joyner at gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
Friends of Sidney Joyner is the email, and then on Facebook is Friends of Sidney Joyner. At Facebook.
Okay. Yeah. Help to Adjust Counseling presents If Testimony Was a Person. Like, subscribe, and share. We're on all these platforms as Help to Adjust or under If Testimony Was a Person, the name of the podcast. Peace and love. We'll connect next time.